Learning doesn't have to stop when you leave school. There's so many resources out there for adults who want to improve their reading, writing, or other foundational skills to pursue new passions or simply expand their knowledge. We want to connect you with those vital programs and resources. And ultimately, our goal is to provide valuable resources and tools to our community and encourage everyone to engage and with access to these amazing educational opportunities. Welcome to the very first episode of Literacy Launchpad, Read, Learn, Grow. I am your host, Jose Miguel Longo, and I'm absolutely thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Today, we're going to take a little time to introduce ourselves and explain what this podcast is all about and what you can expect to gain from joining us on this exciting adventure. So here's what Literacy Launchpad is all about. At its heart, this podcast series is an initiative dedicated to promoting literacy, education, and awareness right here in Onondaga County, New York. We believe that literacy is a fundamental right, and it's something that can truly transform lives, whether you're just starting your educational journey or you're a lifelong learner. You might be wondering, why did we create this podcast? Well, that's a really good question. Our mission is our why. Ultimately, it's twofold. The first, we want to empower parents, grandparents, and caregivers with the knowledge and tools they need to foster pre-emergent literacy skills in their children. We know that early years are absolutely crucial for developing a love of reading and a strong foundational skill. And we want to help make the most of those precious moments. Secondly, we want to shine a light on the incredible adult education opportunities available throughout Onondaga County and through the central library systems of Central New York. Learning doesn't have to stop when you leave school. There's so many resources out there for adults who want to improve their reading, writing, or other foundational skills to pursue new passions or simply expand their knowledge. We want to connect you with those vital programs and resources. And ultimately, our goal is to provide valuable resources and tools to our community and encourage everyone to engage and with access to these amazing educational opportunities. So, who exactly is this podcast for? Well, if you're a parent, grandparent, a caregiver with children in your life, this podcast is for you. We know that family structures are diverse, and our content is designed to be relevant to a wide range of families. While our primary language will be English, we're here and we're mindful of our English language learners and in the community to be able to strive for those resources that are accessible to everyone. If you know someone or you are someone who cares about literacy, whether it's yourself, your children, your community, then you found a home here at Literacy Launchpad. Now, I've mentioned several times how this podcast is for people right here in the Onondaga community. Ultimately, I'm thinking broad, like big, international, global, but also national. I mean, here in the United States, it's so essential to really be mindful and aware of what the story is and how to understand how literacy has such a strong impact in children, adolescents, and even in babies. The earlier you start to talk about literacy and you start to read books, share pictures, do all those things with the kids around you and the community that you live in, the more powerful it is and the higher the likelihood of the success rate for those kids in school to continue their education and for their future and their success. Now, before I jump into other parts of why we're hosting this podcast, what this podcast is all about, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I am Jose Miguel Longo, the host of this podcast series, and I was brought on to kind of complete a project that ultimately came through from a wonderful human who actually started this initiative as an idea for their graduate school project. Now, in this episode, obviously, this is an introduction to what is Literacy Launchpad and the reason why. But ultimately, for me as your host, I'm here to really engage with experts in their area who are supporting literacy in the community. Ultimately, these are folks in schools, libraries, in nonprofit organizations, in programs that are supporting literacy resources here at the local community level in Syracuse, New York, and Onondaga County. But my vision for this podcast is to ultimately take it at the national level and hopefully global. So we're getting started here right in our community, in our backyard, but to make sure that we're influencing the people who need it the most. And we know that parents, grandparents, whoever you are, you're busy. Your schedules have only gotten busier and busier as kids are getting older, but also life is fast paced. So why not create a podcast that gives you a lot of resources in multiple layers, something that's either a quick and digestible read that gives you takeaways, that gives you links to pages to find information, and to continue sharing content, not just in an audio format from a podcast, but in a video format. So from my perspective, I already mentioned my name, but I'm actually a podcaster myself. This is actually my second podcast that I'm launching. I actually host a podcast called Coaching for Millennials. I started the podcast back in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, and ultimately I've grown it to the last 5 years, and I'm continuing to grow the show more and more and more. But my passion has always been in education, and I've always looked for ways to really stand out and do something different outside of the box from an educational standpoint. I spent the bulk of my career in my early days for about 15 years working in higher education, particularly around working with college students. And I later transitioned more recently back in 2021 to go work in the ed tech space. Now I actually work as a customer success manager for a tech company, not an ed tech, but I still have my feet dipped in the education space. I create course content. I do coaching for careers. I do career coaching and life coaching. And I also teach and create courses for State University of New York, which is SUNY. But the organization that I'm contracted under is called SUNY Center for Professional Development. So my words were not coming to me. But I'm hoping that you get the opportunity to get to know me, get to know our audience, get to know our guests who are going to be on the show, to really just share their stories. It's not even just about the opportunity to connect you with these individuals who have an expertise. It's about being able to bring a community together and to really connect in one another and talk about why literacy is so important and the impact that you, by sharing this in your community with the people around you, how that matters. So you get to know more about me, get to know more about our guest as we go throughout the series. But from now, let's continue the story as to, why Literacy Launchpad. Now, a little bit about the inspiration for it. So I already mentioned before it stemmed from the amazing work that this graduate student kind of came up with. But the reality is that there's an organization behind the face of Literacy Launchpad, and that's the Onondaga County Literacy Coalition, or I should really phrase that, Literacy Coalition of Onondaga County. They're actually very heavily focused in creating accessibility for literacy for everyone. And that's not a small feat. But ultimately, the objective is that as we look at programs and we look at resources, that we're able to take that, understand where the gaps are, and create easily digestible and accessible information for parents and for educators that is centralized in creating opportunities. And it's not just opportunities for children, but it's also opportunities for adult learners and people who are looking to expand their education. We ultimately also wanted to create a platform that brought experts together to share practical strategies and highlight the fantastic local initiatives that are making such a huge difference and impact in our community every single day. This podcast is also about empowering a community with the knowledge and connecting them with the resources they need to thrive. So what can you expect to hear and learn from this podcast series? Well, ultimately, it's really simple. Prepare yourself for a wealth of information that is going to provide you resources, tools, tips, guides, but in bite-sized increments. What can you expect? So you can expect to have 2 episodes a month, typically every other Wednesday. You'll have a consistent flow of fresh content. Each episode will be about 30 minutes long, and it's designed for it to be conversational and informational, ultimately making it easy to fit into your schedule. It'll give you the opportunity to hit pause, come back. You can listen to it at 1.5 speed, whatever floats your boat and makes it comfortable and easier for you, ultimately. Another thing that's important to know is that we'll be diving deep into a wide range of topics that are related to literacy. When I was thinking about how do I construct a series that explores so much information, I had to get creative. And obviously, building this podcast series was so important for what the finished product would look like, because it is a series, and I'll tell you more about that here in a second. I had to really make these themes for the episodes stand out. So here are some of the ideas that I came up with for what you can anticipate. First, it's early literacy development. Ultimately, this theme and topic is surrounding around the understanding of the core components of pre-emergent literacy. So that means how does having awareness of phonetical information, how words sound, looking at print concepts. So what does a book look like? Understanding vocabulary. So this is going to be helpful for parents or grandparents who are taking care of kids and spending a lot of time in engaging them in the conversation about reading, but also looking at how to say words and read words. Another theme that was created was reading aloud. There's so much power that comes from the interaction of reading aloud. I was actually a kid who grew up reading aloud all the time, and still sometimes I do. But reading aloud provides, opportunities for how to teach and spark joy in reading. It actually makes it easier sometimes when you struggle to say certain words or sound out a word. So it could be a lot of fun for kids. Literacy through play. This is obviously one of those things that's important in our everyday society. Sometimes kids and even adults find reading daunting. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a task that you ultimately feel like overwhelmed by the idea. The idea of literacy through play is to how to integrate literacy into the everyday things. So using games, using song, and literacy language. How can you create those language gaps that sometimes come up when it comes to being very active in that engagement? And another idea also was digital literacy. This is probably my favorite. Obviously, as a millennial, digital literacy has a very much part of my day-to-day. So navigating screen time and the impact on literacy. When newspapers started to go away, I wasn't always a newspaper reader, but I became a newspaper reader as a young kid, and I hate having my hands dirty. And when technology became the thing, tablets, iPads, all that stuff, I enjoyed reading my magazines and my books on a tablet. Granted, I have tons of books behind me and books in storage, but ultimately it just gives a different feel. So digital literacy is really about how do you navigate and have a high impact on the quality education that you can get from online media and apps and resources. That's going to be a good one for parents who are obviously wanting to help engage their kids, especially those adolescents, those tweens, and really connecting with digital literacy. Another topic that's really, really important in our community is adult literacy. And I can't say this enough. Adult literacy here is going to be highlighting those vital adult education programs that are spread out in our local community here in Onondaga County, while also emphasizing the importance of lifelong learning. So critical, so important. I will use myself as an example. I've been wanting to take a baking class, and our local BOCES has a culinary arts program that you can go get a certificate through pretty much any type of hobby or industry you have an interest in. And for 3 years, I just couldn't do it. My work schedule was just not allowing me to kind of pivot to go take a class because I was traveling so much. Well, finally, I was able to take course 1 of cake decorating and course 2 of cake decorating. And hopefully this fall, I will take course 3. And the reason I bring this up is because the more you engage in your own learning, the better and more socialized, I guess is a good word, you feel and you are. And there's such a great opportunity to connect with people in your community and spend time learning from one another. But also lifelong learning is so critical for the mind and exercising and flexing that muscle. Another theme that I think is, if not the most important one, but one that I think will stand out in this series throughout consistently, is community literacy initiatives. This is the part where we talk about the programs in our community. How do you get involved? How can you volunteer? How do you do the things that make you part of the community that you're in? Whether it's going to the library and volunteering for a couple of hours to read to kids, or going into the school that your kid goes to and, participating in the book fair. Whatever that looks like is going to be how you can get engaged in your community. Another one is school readiness. This is so important, and it's important for a variety of things. School readiness is about discussing the skills and knowledge that children need to succeed in school, period. It's also an opportunity for how parents can prepare their little ones for kindergarten. I can't emphasize that enough. So that one is really, really important. In addition to that, there's multilingual literacy. Now, I'm actually a native speaker of Spanish. English is my second language. I was very, very lucky that I learned Spanish first. It was just happened. Both my parents speak Spanish, and I was and my grandparents and my whole family spoke Spanish, but I was in a Spanish-speaking household. It wasn't until I went to kindergarten that I actually learned English. And my mom realized very quickly that in order for me to not fall behind, that I needed to actually start talking in English at home as well. So lucky for me, I grew up in a multilingual household where I spoke in Spanish to the rest of my family except my mom, and then I started to speak English more and more. But I was reading by the age of 4 and 5, the Spanish newspaper. So with multilingual literacy, there's so many pockets of our community here in Syracuse that are very diverse. And what we find a lot is that parents will influence their kids to forget the language that either is their first language just because they want to assimilate to the culture. But what we want to make sure that people are doing is that they're actually celebrating their culture and the language and the diversity where they come from. It's so important to not lose that. I see how my best friends, my brother and my cousins who all have kids, and they don't really talk to their kids in Spanish or in whatever language that is, which it's a lost art form. You've got so much of a new generation that's growing up and not actually able to speak the language that their native parents or grandparents or great-grandparents come from. So really important to emphasize that we should support that parents and people who have multilingual households, that we celebrate that and that the language is actually continuing to live in a tradition and continuing to live in the culture. Another topic that is also super important is overcoming reading challenges. Addressing the common reading challenges like dyslexia, say that 3 times fast, and other learning disabilities, and providing the resources and strategies for parents on how to cope with those. Can't tell you enough how challenging reading was for me a little bit. I am a very slow reader. I do not read fast. And in order for me to remember or retain information, I have to read slow. So I would spend hours rereading what I read just so that I could actually feel like I was understanding what I was actually learning. So important that as we have more and more children who are either struggling with just learning in general because of the world we live in today, or because they may have a form of a disability, but it hasn't kind of shown up yet in its traditional format. It's just kind of approaching as they're growing up a little bit. The parents understand and learn what their options are, and then looking for those signs so that they're actually able to support their kids. Now, this isn't the last theme that we're highlighting in the podcast series, but it's the last thing that I'm going to mention that stands out. And this one is the power of storytelling. Storytelling is such an important tool, but also it gives the opportunity to develop new language skills. And then it also inhabits the opportunity to foster imagination. It's a great way for how we can encourage not just kids, but also young adults in expanding their imagination, but bringing that home. Not just letting it happen in school, having the conversations with parents, having a conversation with teachers so that students can continue to do that in their home. Now, I've gone on and on about these themes and topics you can anticipate and expect to come in the podcast series. Something to note that this podcast series is actually created for 18 to 20 episodes. The one thing that I'll also add to that is that my goal and objective is that if we make this podcast successful, that we can extend it from just an 18 episode series, that we can actually make it a full show, meaning it will have a perpetual ongoing season. So we'll go from season 1 year, season 2 the following year. That's kind of how my other podcast runs. The other thing about this podcast is that it's actually going to always have a guest. This is probably the only episode where you'll find that I'm talking here by myself. And although I love to talk, and yeah, sometimes talking to yourself is a little weird, but it actually can be really effective. But ultimately, I'm really excited to actually have really meaningful, engaging, and fun conversations with people every time I get together with them, and then to bring you all as an audience as we continue to grow the show and continue to grow the series, some really unique topics, people who are just really experts in their area, but are really excited to share that with the world and share with people. So we'll be bringing you a lot of insight about early childhood education specialists, children's librarians, occupational therapists, education technology experts. We'll also have representatives from local adult education programs, literacy coordinators, school literacy coaches, children's book authors. I mean, the list goes on. The list of people we kind of put together for this series, I was a little bit blown away, because when I brought my kind of ideas and themes and the topics that I was looking to frame from the series to the Literacy Coalition of Onondaga County, they were like super impressed with how I came up with it. I obviously did my homework, and I was really, jazzed about creating this series, but ultimately I let them, be the ones that kind of helped navigate who these conversations came from. They're so connected in the community, and I can't mention how important the work that they do. I'm just here to bring it to life, but they're the ones that do the work every single day. So you'll be hearing directly from the experts who are obviously making a difference in the world of literacy, but also to have a sneak peek into the world of what it is to be having a podcast and being able to share all the beautiful things that are essential, that are needed for success. So now that I've given you a sneak peek into Literacy Launchpad, Read, Learn, Grow, I want to make sure that you understand that this is obviously a passion project. This is something that we truly believe in, and we truly value the resources that we can share with you, share with your children, and the entire community. I'm so excited that we get to bring this to life and ultimately being able to bring some magic to the world and some goodness to the world. And before I wrap up today, I have a quick call to action for you. If you've heard anything about this intro episode that resonated with you, please subscribe to Literacy Launchpad, Read, Learn, Grow. And you can find this podcast on obviously all the platforms, because you're listening to it on one now, but we also have a YouTube channel. So if you don't want to miss an episode of this podcast and you want to come back every other week to find some new content, be sure to subscribe, like each episode, leave us a comment if there's a topic or an idea that you have for an episode, and share this with someone who you think would benefit from hearing this content. The more we spread the word around literacy, the more lives we can touch with the power of reading, learning, and growing. Thank you so much for being part of this episode and for tuning in. Until next time, have a good day. Bye.